The iron gates of Stanford Estate opened with a soft mechanical hum, revealing a world Emily Brooks had only seen in magazines. The sprawling mansion stood like a castle against the Boston skyline, its white columns gleaming in the afternoon sun. Emily clutched her bag tighter, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This was her chance to prove herself, to build a better life for herself and her mother, who had worked as the head housekeeper here for 15 years. Good start. I need to continue building the scene, introduce the characters naturally, and set up the conflict. Let me continue with Emily meeting Sophie in the household. The car stopped at the grand entrance, and Emily stepped out, smoothing down her simple blue dress. Her mother, Margaret, waited at the top of the marble steps, her warm smile easing some of Emily's tension. "Welcome home, sweetheart," Margaret said, embracing her daughter. "Mr. Stanford is eager to meet you. Sophie has been asking about her new nanny all morning." Emily followed her mother through halls decorated with priceless art and gleaming chandeliers. Everything spoke of wealth beyond imagination, yet there was a coldness to it, an emptiness that made Emily shiver despite the warm spring day. They found Gregory Stanford in his study, a tall man with dark hair touched with gray at the temples. His blue eyes held a deep sadness that no amount of money could hide. When he looked up from his desk, Emily saw a man still drowning in grief, 2 years after losing his wife to cancer. "Miss Brooks," he said, his voice deep and measured, "thank you for accepting this position. My daughter Sophie is very precious to me. She has been through so much." "Understand, Mr. Stanford," Emily replied softly. "I will do everything I can to care for her." Before Gregory could respond, a small voice called out from the doorway. "Daddy, is this my new friend?" Emily turned to see a beautiful little girl with golden curls and green eyes that sparkled with curiosity. Sophie wore a pink dress with white ribbons, but there was a paleness to her skin that concerned Emily immediately. "Hello, Sophie." Emily knelt down to the child's level. "I'm Emily. I'm going to be spending lots of time with you." Sophie's face lit up with a genuine smile, and she rushed forward to hug Emily. The gesture was so pure, so trusting that Emily felt her heart swell with protective instinct. "Can we play tea party?" Sophie asked eagerly. "Of course we can," Emily laughed. As Sophie took Emily's hand to lead her away, a woman appeared in the hallway. She was stunning, with sleek black hair, sharp cheekbones, and eyes like polished amber. Her designer dress probably cost more than Emily's entire wardrobe. This had to be Vanessa Price, Gregory's girlfriend. "Oh, you must be the new nanny," Vanessa said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "How quaint." "I'm Vanessa, Gregory's fiancé." Emily noticed Gregory flinch slightly at the word fiancé, but he said nothing. "Nice to meet you, Emily," replied politely. "Sophie, darling, shouldn't you rest?" Vanessa's voice dripped with false sweetness. "You know how tired you get?" "But I feel good today," Sophie protested. "Nevertheless," Vanessa insisted, "you need your medicine first." Emily watched as Vanessa produced a small bottle from her purse, pouring a spoonful of clear liquid. Something about the interaction made Emily uncomfortable, though she could not pinpoint why. The first week passed quickly. Emily fell into a routine with Sophie, reading stories, playing games, and teaching her to paint. The little girl was bright and creative, but Emily noticed disturbing patterns. Sophie would be energetic and happy in the mornings, but after lunch, prepared by Vanessa, she would become lethargic, sometimes feverish. The doctors had diagnosed her with a mysterious immune disorder, but something felt wrong about it all. Emily's mother had warned her to mind her own business. "Vanessa has Mr. Stanford wrapped around her finger," Margaret had said quietly one evening. She showed up 6 months after Mrs. Stanford died, all sympathy and support. Now she practically runs this house. But Emily could not ignore what she saw. Sophie's symptoms were too convenient, too timed. She began keeping notes, documenting when Sophie fell ill and what she had eaten. One night, unable to sleep, Emily went down to the kitchen for water. The house was dark and silent. As she approached, she heard soft footsteps and quickly hid behind a column. Vanessa entered the kitchen, moving with purpose. She went to a high cabinet, pulled out a small vial hidden behind the spice jars, and examined it in the dim light from the refrigerator. Emily's blood ran cold as she watched Vanessa uncap the vial and add several drops to a container of soup in the refrigerator. The same soup designated for Sophie's lunch the next day. Vanessa stirred it carefully, returned the vial to its hiding place, and left as silently as she had come. Emily stood frozen, her mind reeling. What had she just witnessed? Was Vanessa poisoning Sophie? But why? The question swirled in her head as she tried to process the horrifying reality. She thought about confronting Vanessa immediately, but fear held her back. Vanessa had power and influence. Who would believe a young nanny over the woman who had charmed one of Boston's wealthiest men? Emily needed proof, real evidence, that could not be dismissed. Quietly, Emily went to the cabinet and found the vial. She photographed it with her phone, careful not to move anything. The label was partially torn, but she could make out enough to know it was not any ordinary medicine. She took pictures of the soup container as well, documenting everything. As she crept back to her room, Emily's hands shook. She had stumbled onto something dark and dangerous. Tomorrow, she would have to decide what to do with this knowledge. But one thing was certain, she would not let Sophie be harmed. That innocent little girl deserved protection, deserved the truth. Emily lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as dawn approached. She thought of Sophie's trusting smile, of Gregory's grief-stricken eyes, of the evil hiding behind Vanessa's perfect facade. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, she would begin the fight for Sophie's life, even if it meant risking her own position, her own safety. The first light of morning crept through her window, and Emily made her decision. She would protect Sophie no matter the cost. She would uncover Vanessa's scheme and expose the truth. And somehow, she would save this broken family from the predator in their midst. Emily barely touched her breakfast the next morning, her stomach twisted in knots. She had spent hours going through the photos on her phone, zooming in on the vial's label, trying to decipher the medical terminology. Whatever Vanessa was giving Sophie was not prescribed by any legitimate doctor. Margaret noticed her daughter's distress immediately. "Emily, what's wrong? You look like you haven't slept." Emily glanced around the kitchen to ensure they were alone. "Mom, I need to talk to you. Somewhere private." They retreated to Margaret's small apartment above the garage, a cozy space that had been her home for over a decade. Once the door was closed, Emily pulled out her phone and showed her mother the photos. "I saw her, Mom. Last night, Vanessa went to the kitchen and put something in Sophie's soup. I watched her do it." Emily's voice shook as she relived the moment. Margaret's face went pale. She sat down heavily on the sofa, studying the images. Dear God, that poor child. "But Emily, this is dangerous. Vanessa has Mr. Stanford convinced she's the answer to all his prayers. If you accuse her without solid proof, she'll destroy you." "I know," Emily said. "That's why I need your help. We need to document everything, gather evidence that can't be disputed. I'm going to take that soup to be tested, but I need you to cover for me." Margaret's expression shifted from fear to determination. She had spent 15 years serving the Stanford family, had loved Mrs. Catherine Stanford like a sister, and had watched Gregory spiral into grief. If Vanessa was truly harming Sophie, Margaret would move heaven and earth to stop her. "Tell me what you need," Margaret said firmly. Over the next 3 days, Emily and Margaret worked in secret. Emily carefully collected a sample of the soup, storing it in a sealed container. Margaret used her position to access household records, discovering that Vanessa had been ordering unusual supplements and medications online, having them delivered to a separate address. Emily photographed Sophie's symptoms daily, noting the precise timing of her episodes. Meanwhile, Emily continued her duties with Sophie, growing more attached to the sweet child with each passing hour. Sophie was intelligent and kind, with her mother's gentle spirit. She would draw pictures of angels, saying they were watching over her mommy in heaven. Each drawing broke Emily's heart a little more. Gregory began to notice Emily's dedication. He would find her reading to Sophie long after bedtime, or teaching her daughter complex math concepts through games. One evening, he stopped by Sophie's room to find Emily sitting beside the sleeping child, gently stroking her hair. "She adores you," Gregory said softly from the doorway. Emily looked up, startled. She's an amazing little girl. You should be very proud. Gregory entered the room, his presence filling the space. Up close, Emily could see the fine lines around his eyes, the weight of responsibility he carried. I am proud, but I worry constantly. These illnesses, they seem to come out of nowhere. The doctors can't find anything definitively wrong, yet she suffers. Emily's pulse quickened. This was her moment to plant seeds of doubt. Mr. Stanford, has anyone tracked what Sophie eats before these episodes? Sometimes food sensitivities can cause strange symptoms. Gregory frowned, considering. Vanessa handles most of Sophie's meals. She's very particular about nutrition, of course, Emily said carefully. I'm sure she means well. I just wonder if perhaps we should keep a food diary. Track everything Sophie consumes. It might help the doctors. That's actually an excellent idea, Gregory said, his eyes meeting Emily's. For a moment, something passed between them, a connection that made Emily's breath catch. You really care about her, don't you? Very much, Emily whispered. Gregory's hand briefly touched Emily's shoulder, a gesture of gratitude that sent warmth through her entire body. Thank you, Emily. You've been a blessing to this house. After he left, Emily sat in the quiet room, her heart racing. She had not expected to feel this way, had not anticipated the pull toward this grieving man. But there was something about Gregory's vulnerability, his fierce love for his daughter, that drew her in. She shook her head, trying to focus. Romance was a distraction she could not afford right now. The breakthrough came when Emily took the soup sample to a private laboratory, using money she had saved from her modest salary. She befriended a young lab technician named Kevin, explaining that she suspected food contamination was making a child ill. Kevin agreed to run tests discreetly. 3 days later, Kevin called her with results that made Emily's blood run cold. The soup contained traces of ipecac syrup, a substance used to induce vomiting, and low doses of a sedative commonly used for anxiety. Both were being administered in amounts small enough to avoid immediate detection, but large enough to cause chronic symptoms. Whoever is doing this knows exactly what they're doing, Kevin said grimly. This is deliberate poisoning designed to mimic illness without killing. You need to go to the police. Emily thanked him and immediately called Detective James Holland, a family friend who had helped her mother years ago during a break-in. James was a seasoned investigator with the Boston Police Department, known for his thoroughness and integrity. They met at a coffee shop downtown, away from prying eyes. Emily laid out everything: the photos, the lab results, the timeline of Sophie's illnesses, the mysterious orders Vanessa had placed. James listened intently, his expression growing darker with each revelation. This is serious, Emily. If what you're saying is true, we're looking at attempted murder, possibly with financial motives. Has there been any change to Mr. Stanford's will recently? Emily's eyes widened. She had not considered that angle. I don't know, but Vanessa has been pushing for marriage. She calls herself his fiancée, though I've never seen him confirm it. James made notes rapidly. I'll need to investigate her background, see if there's a pattern. Women like this, they don't usually start with one victim. But Emily, you need to be careful. If she suspects you know something, you could be in danger. That night, danger found them anyway. Sophie woke screaming, her body convulsing with fever. Emily rushed to her room to find the child burning up, her lips turning blue. Vanessa was there, holding a spoon, looking startled and guilty. What did you give her? Emily demanded, pushing past Vanessa to reach Sophie. Just her medicine, Vanessa snapped. Call an ambulance. Emily scooped Sophie into her arms and ran downstairs, shouting for Gregory. He emerged from his study, taking one look at his daughter's condition and immediately calling emergency services at the hospital. Dr. Rachel Foster, the pediatrician on call, examined Sophie thoroughly. She was a sharp woman in her 40s with keen observational skills. After stabilizing Sophie, she pulled Gregory and Emily aside. Mr. Stanford, I've reviewed Sophie's medical history. These recurring episodes don't fit any natural illness pattern. They're too regular, too conveniently timed. I'm obligated to report this as a possible case of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Gregory looked confused. What does that mean? It means Dr. Foster said gently. Someone close to Sophie may be deliberately making her sick to gain attention or sympathy. Emily watched Gregory's face transform from confusion to horror to rage as the implications sank in. His eyes found Emily's, and in that moment, she knew he was beginning to suspect the truth. The man she was falling for was about to have his world shattered, and Emily would be there to help pick up the pieces. Vanessa appeared in the hallway, perfectly composed, her mask of concern flawlessly in place. But Emily saw the calculation in her eyes, the cold assessment of how to turn this situation to her advantage. The battle lines were drawn. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. Detective James Holland arrived at the hospital within the hour, his badge giving him immediate access to Sophie's room. Gregory sat beside his daughter's bed, holding her small hand while she slept, sedated and peaceful for the first time in months. Emily stood by the window, her arms crossed, watching Vanessa pace in the hallway like a caged animal. "Mr. Stanford," James said quietly, "I need to speak with you privately. It's about your daughter's condition." They moved to a small consultation room where Dr. Foster joined them. James laid out his findings methodically, showing Gregory the evidence Emily had gathered, the photographs, the lab results, the pattern of Sophie's illnesses correlating exactly with Vanessa's presence and meal preparations. "I ran a background check on Vanessa Price," James continued. "That's not her real name. She's actually Vanessa Hartley, and she has a history. 3 years ago, she was engaged to a wealthy widower in Chicago. His young son became mysteriously ill, nearly died. The engagement ended when the father's sister grew suspicious. No charges were filed because they couldn't prove anything definitively, but Vanessa left town quickly." Gregory's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white. "She's been poisoning my daughter. My Sophie?" His voice cracked with anguish and rage. "We believe so," Dr. Foster added. "The substances found in the soup sample are consistent with Sophie's symptoms. Small doses over time, designed to create chronic illness without causing immediate death. It's a calculated, methodical form of abuse." "But why?" Gregory's eyes filled with tears. "Why would she do this to an innocent child?" James pulled out another document. "I also discovered that you recently updated your will, naming Vanessa as Sophie's guardian in the event of your death. Is that correct?" Gregory's face went ashen. "She convinced me it was the right thing to do. Said Sophie needed a mother figure, that if anything happened to me, Sophie would need someone who loved her. I signed it 3 weeks ago." And, James continued, "You have a life insurance policy worth $50 million? With Sophie as the primary beneficiary until she turns 18? If Vanessa became her guardian, she would control that money." The pieces fell into place with horrifying clarity. Vanessa was not trying to kill Sophie directly. She was making the child chronically ill, positioning herself as the devoted caretaker, worming her way into Gregory's will and trust. Eventually, with full legal control, she could either let Sophie waste away or arrange a tragic accident. Either way, Vanessa would inherit everything. Emily entered the room, unable to stay away. "Mr. Stanford, I'm so sorry. I should have come to you sooner." Gregory looked at her, this young woman who had risked everything to protect his daughter. "You saved her life, Emily. If you hadn't been paying attention, if you hadn't cared enough to investigate, I would have lost her." He stood and crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "How can I ever thank you?" "Just let me help you finish this," Emily said firmly. "Vanessa needs to face justice." James nodded. "I have enough for an arrest warrant, but I want to catch her in the act. Get an ironclad case. Dr. Foster, can you discharge Sophie into home care with monitoring?" "Absolutely," Dr. Foster agreed. "I'll prescribe strict dietary protocols. Nothing prepared by anyone except approved staff." They set the trap carefully. Sophie was released the next day with instructions for bland, simple foods. Gregory informed Vanessa that he was hiring a private nurse and that Emily would be supervising all of Sophie's care personally. Vanessa's smile remained fixed, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of panic. That evening, Margaret approached Gregory in his study. "Mr. Stanford, I need to show you something." She presented him with financial records she had quietly copied, showing wire transfers from Vanessa's account to various online pharmacies, purchases of Ipecac, sedatives, and other substances over the past 6 months. She used the credit card I gave her for household expenses, Gregory said bitterly. I trusted her completely, Sir Margaret said gently. My daughter risked her job and her safety because she loves Sophie. Emily is a remarkable young woman. I hope you see that. Gregory looked up at Margaret, then toward the window where he could see Emily playing with Sophie in the garden. Sophie was laughing, truly laughing, for the first time in weeks. I do see it, Margaret. More clearly than you know. The confrontation came 2 nights later. Detective Holland had placed hidden cameras throughout the house, and Emily made sure to mention loudly that she would be out for the evening, taking Margaret to a doctor's appointment. Gregory would be working late at his office. Sophie would be alone with Vanessa for 3 hours. In reality, they were all watching from a surveillance van parked down the street, monitors showing every room. Emily's heart pounded as she watched Vanessa enter. Sophie's room, where the child slept peacefully, Vanessa moved with practiced efficiency. Pulling a small bottle from her purse, she mixed it into Sophie's evening milk, stirring carefully. But before she could bring it to the child's lips, the bedroom door burst open. Step away from her. Gregory's voice was ice cold as he entered with Detective Holland and 2 uniformed officers behind him. Vanessa froze, the cup still in her hand. Her mask finally cracked, revealing the cold calculation beneath. Gregory, darling, this isn't what it looks like. I was just giving her the vitamins the doctor prescribed. The doctor prescribed no such thing, Dr. Foster said, entering behind them. And that's not vitamins in that cup. We'll be testing it, along with everything else in your possession. James moved forward with handcuffs. Vanessa Hartley, you're under arrest for the attempted murder of Sophie Stanford, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent, Vanessa's composure shattered. You don't understand. I deserve this life. I've worked for it, planned for it. That child was going to give me everything I've ever wanted. Her voice rose to a shriek as officers led her away. You're nothing without your money, Gregory. Nothing. The silence after she left was profound. Gregory walked slowly to Sophie's bed, gathering his sleeping daughter into his arms. Tears streamed down his face as he held her close. My baby girl. My precious baby girl. Emily approached quietly, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. Gregory looked up at her, his eyes full of gratitude and something deeper, something that made Emily's heart race. You saved her, he whispered. You saved my daughter when I was too blind to see the danger. I did what anyone would do, Emily said softly. No, Gregory shook his head. You did what someone with a pure heart would do. Someone brave and selfless and extraordinary. He stood, still holding Sophie, and faced Emily fully. I know this is complicated and the timing is terrible. But Emily, these past weeks, watching you with Sophie, seeing your kindness and strength, I've felt something I thought I'd never feel again. Emily's breath caught. Mr. Stanford, Gregory, he interrupted gently. Please, call me Gregory. Gregory, Emily repeated, the name feeling right on her lips. I care about Sophie more than I can express, and I care about you too. But we should take this slowly, for Sophie's sake. You're right, Gregory agreed. Sophie comes first, always. But Emily, when the time is right, I want to explore what this could be between us. Will you give me that chance? Emily smiled, tears of relief and joy streaming down her face. Yes, when the time is right. The trial took place 4 months later. Vanessa was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 25 years in prison. The prosecution had built an overwhelming case, including testimony from the Chicago family, whose son she had nearly killed, and evidence of 2 other similar schemes in different cities under different names. Sophie made a full recovery. Without the poison in her system, she blossomed into a vibrant, healthy child. She grew especially close to Emily, often calling her my Emily, with possessive affection. Gregory threw himself into being a better father, scaling back his work hours to spend more time with Sophie. Emily continued as Sophie's nanny, but her role in the household evolved. She became Gregory's confidant, his partner in healing and rebuilding their lives. 6 months after Vanessa's arrest, on a crisp autumn evening, Gregory took Emily and Sophie to the Boston Harbor. They walked along the waterfront, Sophie running ahead to feed the seagulls, her laughter carrying on the wind. "She's so happy," Emily observed, watching the little girl with pure love. "We all are," Gregory said, taking Emily's hand. "Emily, I know we agreed to take things slowly, and we have. But I need you to know that you've become essential to our lives, to my life. I'm falling in love with you, and I think Sophie already loves you like a mother." Emily turned to face him, her eyes shining. "I love her too. And Gregory, I'm falling in love with you as well." Gregory pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "Then would you consider making this permanent? Not just as Sophie's nanny, but as my wife, as her mother, as part of our family forever." Emily gasped as he opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. "Gregory, are you sure?" "It's only been 6 months since I'm absolutely certain," Gregory said firmly. "I've learned that life is precious and short, that we shouldn't waste time when we find something real. You're real, Emily. Your love is real. And I don't want to spend another day without knowing you'll be by our side." "Yes," Emily whispered, then louder, "Yes, I'll marry you." Sophie came running back at that moment, immediately noticing the ring on Emily's finger. "Does this mean Emily's going to be my mommy?" "If that's okay with you, sweetheart," Gregory said, kneeling beside his daughter. Sophie threw her arms around both of them. "I've been praying for this. I asked the angels to send me a new mommy, and they sent Emily." They stood there together, wrapped in each other's arms, a family forged through darkness, but emerging into light. Emily thought back to that first day when she had walked through the gates of Stanford Estate, nervous and uncertain. She had come to be a nanny, but she had found so much more. She had found purpose, love, a family worth fighting for. The wedding took place the following spring in the Stanford Estate gardens. Sophie served as flower girl, scattering rose petals with solemn importance. Margaret cried happy tears as she watched her daughter marry the man who had captured her heart, as Emily and Gregory exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other, to raise Sophie together. To build a life based on trust and truth, Emily reflected on how one act of courage had changed everything. She had risked her job, her safety, even her life, to save an innocent child. In return, she had gained a daughter, a husband, and a love she had never imagined possible. The darkness of Vanessa's deception had been vanquished by the light of truth and love. And in the end, the Brooks girl who had walked through those iron gates with nothing but hope and determination had found her true home, her true family, and her true happiness. Sophie squeezed Emily's hand during the reception. "Mommy, Emily, are you happy?" Emily looked at her new daughter, then at her husband, surrounded by people who loved them, and smiled with her whole heart. "Sweetheart, I've never been happier in my entire life." She meant every word. Their story, which had begun in shadows and suspicion, had transformed into something beautiful and true. They had faced evil together and emerged victorious. Now their future stretched before them, bright with promise and filled with love.